This is a recording of the City of Harrisonburg's November 19th virtual meeting on the Comprehensive Housing Assessment and Market Study. Nearly 80 residents and stakeholders attended this meeting virtually on the webinar format. The meeting also ran live on the Community Access channel. For more information on this effort and to participate in the process, visit the City of Harrisonburg's website at www.harrisonburgva.gov/housing-study.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us this evening. My name is Adam Fletcher, Director of Community Development for the City of Harrisonburg. Tonight's meeting is the presentation of findings as it relates to the city's comprehensive housing assessment and market study. This project began this past summer in July when the city contracted with Mullin Lonergan Associates, also known as M&L, to complete the study, which is a component of one of the key focuses of City Council's vision for Harrisonburg. That focus being available housing for all. The information presented tonight does not include all data that will be in the final product, but includes data that we hope builds on the conversations that our community has been having about housing and to allow folks to ask questions and offer comments to improve the final study. That's basically the purpose of tonight's meeting, to hear comments during the development of the study. I will allow the consulting team to present the findings, but before I do, I want to thank City Council, City Manager Eric Campbell, and Deputy City Manager Andy Banks for their support for this project. It's been an honor of mine to serve as one of the leaders for this project, the other being Amy Snyder, Assistant to the City Manager, and for being part of the team who constantly challenged and supported each other and the consulting team to provide really the best examination possible of the city's housing environment. While others were involved early in the process, I would like to recognize the core city team who, along with Amy and me, include Ton Dang, Assistant Director of Community Development, Chip Brown, GIS Administrator, Michael Wong, Executive Director of Harrisonburg Redevelopment and Housing Authority, and Scott Rogers, Associate Broker with Funkhauser Real Estate Group. With that, I'll now turn it over to Will Cockrell. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Adam. My name is Will Cockrell with EPRPC from Charlottesville, Virginia. I'm part of the consulting team. I did want to give a brief overview of the meeting format, just so that we can answer any questions in terms of how to interact during and after the presentation. This presentation is done through GoToWebinar and set up in a webinar format. We anticipate to have up to 90 attendees on the webinar format, as well as individuals calling in by phone and through the Community Access channel. We have a number that's listed here. If you're listening on the line, I will read it out loud. It is 540-433-1390. You can call this hotline time at any time starting now and provide information. So again, that's 540-433-1390. And you can call at any time, and we will collect those comments and questions and provide them at the end for the question and answer period after the presentation. If you are online with your computer, you can see that there's a toolbar at the side of your screen, and really to focus on an orange arrow. If you click on that orange arrow, you'll see audio, this little gray box, and below that, you'll see questions. If you click on questions, you can enter questions in, and we will receive those and collect those throughout the presentation and during the question and answer period, and address your questions and comments when we reach that point on the agenda. So again, the hotline number, call anytime during the meeting and after. It's 540-433-1390. So with that said, I will hand off to Marjorie Willow with M&L, and we will start off the presentation.
Thanks, Will. So there was a team of my colleagues and I who have been working on this project in collaboration with the city representatives. And we will briefly introduce ourselves, and then finally we will get to the presentation. So my name is Marjorie Willow, and I'm a principal with Mullin Lonergan Associates.
And my name is Jessica Lurs. I am a Housing and Community Development Specialist with M&L.
My name is Christine DeRunk, and I am a Housing and Community Development Specialist with M&L.
My name is Jerry Pavis. I'm the Vice President of Research and Analytics at Fourth Economy.
My name is Chris Worley. I'm an analyst with Fourth Economy.
My name is Todd Gordon. I'm Senior Planner at EPR.
My name is Will Cockrell. I'm a Senior Planner with EPRPC out of Charlottesville, Virginia.
And now we'll begin our presentation.
Harrisonburg is an amenity-rich city with multiple full-service grocery stores, a farmer's market, many parks and playgrounds, elementary schools located throughout the city, a public transit system with low fares compared to other cities, and lively recreational and cultural events and activities. But not all locations within the city have the same level of access to these types of amenities. In this map, each census block group is scored relative only to block groups located within Harrisonburg. So some areas will necessarily score higher and some will score lower. The market activity score in this map indicates the level of sales activity in each block group as measured by the number of days a unit remains on the market, the volume of sales, the change in the volume of sales from 2018 to 2019, and the ratio of the sales price to the list price. Each block group in Harrisonburg is scored relative to all other block groups within the city. There are many reasons why an area can have high or low sale volumes. For example, stable neighborhoods in which owners stay in their homes for many years will be classified as lower and lowest along this metric because fewer homes are listed for sale. An area could also have a low volume of sales because it's less developed with fewer housing units than other parts of Harrisonburg. Days on market is used to determine how quickly a listed housing unit sells. Fewer days on market indicates the units are sold quicker than units with higher days on market. The ratio of the sale to list price indicates how closely the seller comes to receiving their asking price. In instances where a unit sold for more than 100% of the list price, it's likely due to the seller receiving competing offers in a market with a very limited inventory of units for sale. Even in the lowest market, the median days on market was 2 weeks, and 3% of the asking price is still very good. In the United States, the median is 53 days on market. The majority of Harrisonburg's population growth was with college students, 37% of the growth, or 2,224 people, followed by persons who are 65 and older, which made up 14% of the growth, or 813 people. Harrisonburg's poverty rate is largely impacted by college students. Even after adjusting for off-campus college students, some neighborhoods in Harrisonburg have concentrations of poverty near the national rate for non-college students, between 12 and 13%. A more compelling or realistic rate to determine if a household can afford their basic needs would be the United Way's ALICE framework. ALICE stands for Asset Limited, Income Constrained, Employed. ALICE workers earn more than the poverty level, but less than the basic cost of living, and are employed across industries like construction, education, service, and caretaking. The United Way ALICE framework provides an estimate for the cost that families face to meet basic necessities like housing, transportation, food, healthcare, childcare, and a basic smartphone plan. These are households aged 25 and above and are unlikely to include undergraduate students. Since 2010, the cost of living increases such as housing, transportation, and food have outpaced average wage and household income gains in Harrisonburg. Even without factoring the cost of living increases, a household in Harrisonburg making the median household income at a 2018 level could not afford the ALICE survival budget at a 2010 level. Since 2010, Harrisonburg has lost good paying jobs in industries with average wages of about $40,000. From 2010 to 2019, higher paying industries with average wages above $40,000 lost employment. while lower paying industries with average wages below $40,000 gained employment. Higher paying industries lost 648 jobs, while lower paying industries gained 1,300 jobs. Average wages above $40,000 per year are more likely to receive health and other benefits with the job. Also, these wages apply to what one individual makes. The Alice household survival budget is the bare minimum cost of household basic necessity to live and work in the modern economy. These basic budget items include the housing, childcare, food and transportation, healthcare, technology plus taxes, and a contingency fund, which is equal to about 10% of the household budget. The budget is calculated separately for each county and different household types and is updated as costs and household needs change over time. There was an increase in the number of lower paying jobs, and an increase in the number of low paying jobs will increase the number of Alice households or households living below poverty. When adjusted for inflation, median household income has decreased by 4% from 2010 to 2018, according to the Census Bureau.
What is affordable housing? HUD defines housing as being affordable if the household spends no more than 30% of its household income on housing costs. If a household spends more than 30% of income on housing costs, the household is said to be cost burdened. If the household spends more than 50% of its income on housing, then the household has severe cost burden. For housing to be affordable, there are two sides to consider: household income and the cost of housing. If the household income is sufficiently high relative to the cost of housing itself, then households will be able to afford their housing. If household income is low relative to the cost of housing, then the household may be cost burdened. Solving an affordable housing problem within a community, therefore, is a balance between adequate wages to afford housing and an adequate supply of housing units for all income levels. The area median income, or AMI, is a term that refers to the midpoint of a region's income distribution. Half of the families in a region earn more than the median, and half earn less than the median, when taking into account the household size. The U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, or HUD, defines and calculates different levels of AMI for geographic areas across the country by household size. When we refer to 100% AMI throughout the study, we are specifically referring to a household of 4, unless otherwise stated. When HUD performs the AMI calculations, the values get rounded for simplicity. Harrisonburg's area median income in 2017 for a household classified at being at 30% of AMI is $13,200, and a household of 4, $24,600. 50% AMI is $22,000 for a single person household compared to $31,400. 80% AMI, a household of 1, just over $35,000, and a household of 4, just over $50,000. And 100% AMI is $44,000 for a single person household and $64,700 for a household of 4. The concept of a housing mismatch can assist in understanding the housing challenges in Harrisonburg. The study uses data put out by HUD to classify each household based on the household size into an income tier. For example, 0 to 30% AMI, 31 to 50% AMI, and so forth, as we described on the previous slide. Additionally, the data classifies each unit into an affordability tier. For example, if a rental unit costs $780 per month, this would be affordable to a household earning 50% AMI in Harrisonburg. The study does a comparison of the unit's affordability, meaning which income tier it's in, to the occupant's income to see if these are aligned. For example, if there is a household with an income above 81% AMI, living in a unit that is affordable to households earning in the 51 to 80% AMI tier, then this household will not be cost burdened, which is good for that household, but it will contribute to the mismatch because the unit affordability tier and the occupant income tier are not aligned. If a household with income in the 0 to 30% AMI range lives in a unit that is affordable to a household with income in the 51 to 80% range, then this is a problem financially because the household will be cost burdened or possibly even severely cost burdened, and it will contribute to the mismatch because the unit affordability tier and the occupant income tier are not aligned. If a household with an income in the 51 to 80% AMI range lives in a unit that's affordable to a household with income in the 51 to 80% range, then this pairing does not contribute to the mismatch because the unit affordability tier and occupant income tier are aligned. This analysis, the comparison of the unit affordability with the household income tier of the occupants, was done for both renters and owners. The primary challenge in Harrisonburg for both renters and owners is a mismatch between the household's income tier and the affordability tier of the unit in which they reside. In some income tiers, there is the additional challenge that there are not enough units in the city. That is, even if every existing unit in an income tier was occupied by households aligned with that tier, there would still be a shortage of units because there are more households than units in those tiers. We're going to walk through now step by step how to read and interpret the mismatch. We're going to go through this slide in detail, and we will present a summary slide, so don't worry if you don't catch everything. This graph is composed of 4 pairs of bars. From left to right, the pairs correspond to 0 to 30% AMI, 31 to 50% AMI, 51 to 80% AMI, and 81 and above percent AMI. Within each pair of bars, the bar on the left are the households with incomes in that tier, and the bars on the right are the units in that tier. What we see right away is that within the 0 to 30 pair at left and the above 81% pair at right, there are more households than units, indicating a shortage of units that are affordable to households in these income tiers. We see that there are more units than households in the 31 to 50% AMI range and 51 to 80%. But that doesn't tell us the whole story. When we uncover the household bar for 0 to 30% AMI, we can see the level of cost burden. Households in the 0 to 30% AMI tier who are cost burden are shown in dark blue, and households that are not cost burden are shown in light blue. The vast majority of the lowest income renter households are cost burdened. Next, we uncover the bar representing units that are affordable to households with incomes between 0 and 30% AMI. You will see that this bar is color-coded. Red indicates households with incomes between 0 to 30% AMI. Orange is 31 to 50%. Yellow, 51 to 80%. Green 81 to 100% AMI, and purple is for households with incomes above 100% AMI. The units shown in red are affordable to 0 to 30% AMI households and are occupied by 0 to 30% AMI households. The units shown in orange, yellow, green, and purple are affordable to 0 to 30% AMI households, but they are occupied by households outside of that tier. We do not know why these households choose to reside in the most affordable units, only that they are residing in these units. While this makes financial sense for these households, it does increase competition for the most affordable units, as households with the most limited means are competing with higher income households for the same units. In this income tier, this competition is in addition to there being a lack of units. We can do the same comparison within the 31 to 50% AMI tier. In this case, we want to compare the total height of the blue bar, which is the total number of households with incomes between 31 and 50% AMI, and the orange section of the rainbow colored bar. Only the households in orange are living in units that are affordable in their tier. The red households are cost burdened because they are 0 to 30% AMI households living in a more expensive unit. And the yellow, green, and purple households are living below their means. The gray units are vacant. Vacant units do not count towards the mismatch because a household with income between 31 to 50% AMI could move in. Within the 51 to 80% AMI tier, we want to compare the total height of the blue bar with the yellow segment, as these households are living in the units that align with their income tier. Even in this tier, where there appears to be a large surplus of units, there are still many households with both lower and higher incomes residing in these units, and there is still a mismatch for 51 to 80% AMI households. Within the last pair of bars showing the 81 and above % range, we need to compare the total height of the blue bar with the height of the green and purple sections of the rainbow bar. The data source provides information about household income in 80 to 100% AMI and above 100% AMI, but it buckets the units that are affordable into one category of 80% and above. Overall, we find that there is a lack of units for households in the 0 to 30% and above 81% AMI income tiers. Although there are many units for the 31 to 50% and especially the 51 to 80% AMI tier, the units are frequently occupied by higher income households, including households with incomes above 100% AMI. Before we shift into the summary slide that I mentioned, it should be acknowledged that 62% of Harrisonburg's housing stock are rentals, and that of these, 53% are college students living off campus. We know from our research that 92% of college students are dependents of their parents or guardians, and that these students are likely being supported financially in some way. However, because of the way the data is collected, many, if not nearly all of these off-campus college student households will be captured in the 0 to 30% AMI households, since student households typically either do not work or hold part-time jobs. Because of the college student impacts on the rental market, and knowing that many or most receive financial support, we adjusted the mismatch analysis to account for this. Going through the details of this analysis is well beyond what we have time for tonight, but it is included in the report. So in summary, for the rental market mismatch, there is a shortage of housing units that are affordable to the lowest and highest income renter households, the 0 to 30 and above 81% AMI. Some households are cost burdened because they live in a unit that is more expensive, and other households are living below their means. When higher income households live in units that are affordable to lower income households due to limited housing supply, it increases competition for the limited units that are more affordable. The range in the mismatch is provided to show the extent of the challenge households face in finding units in their income tier. For example, a mismatch of 1,407 among the 0 to 30% AMI tier indicates that there are 1,407 households that do not have a unit that is affordable in the 0 to 30% AMI range, despite being a 0 to 30% AMI household. The ranges provided in the other tiers indicate the range of mismatch depending on college student households. If college students live off campus in units that align with their parents' or guardians' income, then the mismatch will be on the lower end. If they reside outside of parents' or guardians' income, then the mismatch could increase. One final note about the mismatch analysis: the mismatch should not be interpreted as a production number. If the city produced the approximately 6,500 units that correspond to the total mismatch, there would be an over 60% increase in the number of rental units citywide, and the vacancy rate would be nearly 40%. The mismatch is provided to assist in understanding which income tiers households may be the most challenged to find housing that is affordable because either there is a lack of units or because of the residency patterns. Looking at the rental inventory by bedroom size, we see that there are relatively few efficiency and one-bedroom units citywide. On this graph, efficiency and one-bedrooms are shown in dark blue, two-bedroom units in light blue, and units with 3 or more bedrooms are shown in gray. A lack of smaller units within the rental market across the income spectrum makes it difficult for various populations to find suitable housing. For example, smaller units are appropriate for supportive housing, but it is difficult to locate and secure these types of units. Additionally, young professionals may not want to have roommates after leaving college, but because they are just beginning their careers, may not be able to afford a larger unit. Their choice becomes to rent a too large unit and possibly be cost burdened, or to find roommates.
Supportive housing is recognized as an effective housing strategy for people with special needs. It combines affordable housing with intensive supportive services to help vulnerable populations stabilize and maintain housing. There is a shortage of affordable housing, most severely for households who earn 0 to 30% AMI, which is equal to $24,600 for a family of 4 or $13,200 for a one-person household. These extremely low income households often spend more than 50% of their income on housing. Some of these households have fixed incomes and disabling conditions that make working difficult. These circumstances often make additional rent subsidy necessary to maintain housing. Harrisonburg has utilized federally funded programs to create the deep subsidy needed for households in supportive housing. Yet not all people with disabilities or conditions need supportive housing or supportive services to maintain stable housing. The supportive services provided to persons living in supportive housing can vary greatly from program to program, depending on an individual's specific needs. All services and supportive housing should be housing oriented and focused on helping the individual remain in housing. They should be voluntary, provide client choice, and offer flexible and responsiveness to meet the changing needs. It's estimated that the COC, which covers the counties of Clark, Frederick, Page, Rockingham, Shenandoah, and Warren, the towns within those counties, and the cities of Harrisonburg and Winchester would need about 126 permanent supportive housing beds over the next 5 years to meet the need of the number of individuals experiencing chronic homelessness. The COC is a network of nonprofits, service providers, and regional planners that work together to build systems to reduce homelessness. Due to the regional approach in addressing homelessness, these permanent supportive housing projections are presented for the full continuum of care. This graph shows the residency patterns among homeowners. The income tiers among owners are 0 to 50% AMI, 51 to 80% AMI, 81 to 100% AMI, and above 100% AMI. The income breakpoints are slightly different in part because it's less common to have homeowners with incomes between 0 and 30% AMI, so some of the data gets aggregated. As in the renter market, rates of cost burden are higher among households with lower incomes. The majority of homeowners have incomes above 100% AMI. There are more households than units in the 0 to 50% AMI and above 100% tiers, in part because there are so many households with incomes above 100% AMI relative to the number of units priced for this tier. These higher income households must buy down market if they wish to live in the city. This can squeeze out lower income households who have less money and fewer housing options. As in the rental market, there is a mismatch caused by both a lack of units affordable to the lowest and highest income tiers and households living in units that do not match their household income. The mismatch within the owner market is highest among households with incomes in the 101 and above % AMI tier, with 2,435 units. While there is a mismatch for households in all tiers below 100% AMI, the mismatches within each tier are about 500 units each, which is approximately 20% of the mismatch for the 101+% AMI income tier. This graph shows the number of owner units by number of bedrooms. Dark blue units with 0 to 1 bedroom, light blue are 2-bedroom units, and gray are units with 3 or more bedrooms. There are very few owner units that are studios or 1 bedroom. Our data source indicates that there are only 26 units citywide. The majority of owner units have 3 or more bedrooms. For households seeking to purchase a smaller home, potentially young professionals or small families, for example, there are very few options. By affordability tier, there are few units available to households with incomes between 0 and 30% of area median income. Even within this tier, there are very few 0 to 1 bedroom units. At this point in our process, the document is still in draft form. We're identifying additional recommendations that we believe are appropriate for Harrisonburg. There are 7 objectives we identified for the city. For the purpose of the presentation tonight, we included 1 example recommendation under each of these objectives. The 7 objectives include educate, prioritize funding and other resources, build capacity, change policy, amend local laws, preserve and create affordable housing opportunities, and advocate for change. We are interested in hearing your thoughts about recommendations. That concludes our presentation on the draft housing study. Now we'd like to hear from you on what we may have missed and suggestions you have on recommendations for resolving the affordable housing issue in Harrisonburg.
Great. Thank you, Jessica. We do have some questions that came in through the app as people selected the questions here online. Please call in if you would like to provide comments and questions again to the hotline number, and leave those there with us, and we will discuss them here during the question and answer. That number again is 540-433-1390. And so we're going to go into the question and answer now. We do have some questions. If we want to bring up the panelists and start answering these questions and addressing comments. Great. Okay. So we do have 5 questions on the chat here. Todd, do we have any questions on the call line yet?
No questions on the call line yet.
All right. So our first question was early on, is from Hadley Jenner, is what is the housing purchasing power for the Alice population, Marjorie?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
It is, what is the housing purchasing power for the Alice population?
Christine, would you like to handle that one?
I will, but I'll need to pull up a spreadsheet to specifically answer for the Alice population. So you can go to the next question, and then once I get the spreadsheet pulled up, we can come back and I'll answer that.
Yeah, sure thing. Well, the next question is also from Hadley, is what gap, if any, is there between the available housing and purchasing power? What gap, if any, is there between available housing and purchasing power?
Christine, I think the same data source you're looking at might be able to answer that one in some way.
I'm not sure I understand the question. Is there a way to get clarification?
Sure, Hadley, if you're still on, if you want to, in the questions function, give a little more clarification on that question. We would be happy to get a little bit more detail on that question if you got there. We have Laura Tani Halsinger asked if we could go back to the recommendations slide. And she would like to take another look at that.
Yes, this is Hadley Jenner. I'm wondering why there is no mention made of the housing trust fund that has been advocated by several groups locally. It's used nationwide in 800 communities. It's a way of providing a source of revenue to support the housing that you identify that's needed here. Thank you.
Okay, we heard a little bit of background noise in there, but were you able to catch that?
Not at all.
Oh, okay. We had Hadley, we had some typing noises that we heard. Sorry that we weren't able to quite make that out, unfortunately.
Will, I'm wondering if the sound of Hadley's voice that we heard was not a replay of his voicemail that he left.
Oh, yes, okay. That might have been because he was muted on there. Let me see here. We had, let's come back to that. Do you want to get these questions up here for, while we can? We had a question, actually a couple of questions. Yes.
Sorry to interrupt. I did get that spreadsheet pulled up, and so I can talk a little bit about the assumptions we had to make to talk about housing affordability based on income. We did look at, I know interest rates are quite low right now, but at the time, we wanted to assume something conservative like a 4% interest rate. And we assumed a 30-year conventional loan with a 5% down payment. So that would result in a home buyer needing to pay PMI. The average PMI for a person with a credit score of 620, which is the score that's needed to qualify for a conventional loan, is 1.2%. And then we made an assumption of about $1,000 a year for like homeowners insurance. And I didn't calculate this specifically on the Alice household, but I can tell you that so the data we have span 2018 to 2020, and depending on the year, because AMI gets adjusted annually, to afford the median sale price, which in 2018 was, we'll call it 186,000, and in 2019 and 2020 is 200,000. Using these assumptions, one would need $53,000 right now to afford a median home price. So an Alice household, and that does not factor in, needing a new bathroom if it's an older unit that needs renovation or, repairs, roof replacement, things of that ilk. This is really just, taxes and insurance, mortgage, interest, and principal. So, the Alice household is 60,000, which is just above the annual income needed for a median home price.
Great. Okay. We have a question from Frank Sotisetti. Frank, I apologize if I did not pronounce that correctly, but a couple of questions here. One is, what is the occupancy rate for our current inventory of off-campus student housing?
Christine, take that one, Marjorie?
Yes.
Yeah, we don't have a data source that's going to tell us precisely if a particular unit is occupied by students or not. What I can tell you, depending on whether we use the data source that comes from HUD or we use ACS, the rental vacancy rate is between 2% and 3.5%. When you look at vacancy rate using ACS data, which is the Census Bureau's data, over the last 10 years, it does fluctuate, and that really is just a snapshot in time. But, it again ranges in that like just under 3 to closer to 5. But at the end of the day, when you average it over the 10 years, it's 3.5%. So it's definitely lower than a healthy vacancy rate of, something that's closer to 5%. But to answer the question specifically about, the off-campus student housing, there's no way for us to know that.
Thank you. More and more questions are starting to funnel in here. I'm noticing a pattern. We're getting a lot of questions, Marjorie, about the Housing Trust Fund. Hadley, I think he was clarifying an earlier question. He put a comment in here and said, of whether you are recommending a housing trust fund.
That's good to hear that that's one of his comments for recommendations. And that would fit under the objective of prioritize funding and other resources. And the meaning behind that is simply to identify what resources would be available in order to capitalize a housing trust fund within the city of Harrisonburg. And there will be more detail than that with that in the document.
Great. We do have a couple of questions to repeat the number, the call-in number. And again, that is 540-433-1390. So just got a couple of those questions in. I'm putting it into the reply as well. That as well, but it's 540-433-1390. Going back up to the top here, we have, apologies for looking through this. Carrie Budd asked, did you look at the data by age? What is the situation for those over 65? And might need some clarification on what data set there, but see if there's any responses of what he may be referring to there.
Christine or Jessica?
We do look at housing by age in the study, particularly when we're talking about the owner market and looking at that mismatch. Part of why there can be a mismatch is because a homeowner bought their home many years ago when they were working. They've since retired. Now their income is much lower, but their home has appreciated in value, and so that can contribute to this mismatch. So in the report, it does break out further by owners with a mortgage versus without a mortgage. It doesn't get to age exactly in that regard, but generally speaking, older people have paid off their homes compared to younger people. So it's one way to get at it. And then in terms of, we do have some projection data that is incorporated into the study to project out to 2025 estimates in terms of how the population may grow by tenure, meaning owner or renter, as well within the elderly population versus the non-elderly population. So that all is included in the study as well.
And I'll add, for the supportive housing section of this study, we also did look at persons who are 65 and older who would have needs that are consistent with the need for supportive housing. And so that will be in the larger document as well.
Great. We have some questions here. We have one from Levy Fuller. Are there other specific funding strategies that you are suggesting? And Levy called out the Housing Trust Fund, but also had this open-ended of any other funding strategies that you're reviewing.
Yes, there are. And we're, as we said in the beginning, this is still in draft form and we're still finalizing the document, including the recommendations. And so as earlier, we're certainly open to suggestions and things that listeners feel would be, good strategies for implementing in the city.
Gil Coleman asked, this is a clarifying question. Can you clarify what you mean by, quote, build capacity among nonprofit service providers and affordable housing providers?
Jessica?
Sure. So during some of the analysis, in particular with the supportive housing and the permanent supportive housing, a lot of the community stakeholders were talking about their ability to operate programs and having limited capacity in terms of some of the administrative things that are required of them. That there are a lot of unfunded mandates with some federal and state programming as it relates to supportive housing. That there was just sort of some services that did not exist in the community that were needed, and other services that are already at capacity and just can't expand. And so, our recommendation is to take a look at that capacity, particularly as it relates to the supportive housing, before the community begins to build new supportive housing or permanent supportive housing units, so that they can ensure that the clients that they move into those programs are successful.
Great. Todd, do you have any comments off of the call line?
We have had some additional questions about a housing trust fund, which may have been addressed already.
Okay. We had another comment from Frank. He was asking about the enrollment cliff with birth rates on the decline. And he had a general question of, is the city anticipating this or planning for this as it relates to housing? And looking at how can housing address the aging population and also this decline in kids and this enrollment cliff that is a trend nationwide. Might be able to talk a little bit about what the trend is here locally as a way of addressing that.
Chris, would you like to try your hand at that one?
Yeah, I'll take a go at it, and Jerry, back me up here. But yeah, that enrollment cliff is something that we've seen nationwide, in that there's just fewer folks that are coming of college age. Of course, enrollments are based off of very, very local conditions. And what we've seen in Harrisonburg is that in the last 10 years, there's been an increase in college students, about 2,300 or so increase in university attendees. Whether or not that trend continues or it levels off, I think is still an open question. I'm sure that JMU administrators are chiefly concerned about that question. But it's tough to say, in local context is really going to rule the day in terms of where enrollments go in the future.
Yeah. We have a question from Danny Fleming. And I know this is something we've talked about. And this is a question about kind of the aspirations of the 80 plus or the above AMI homeowners. And yes, are they intentionally choosing less expensive housing so they're buying down, or is it because higher end housing is not available? And is that a question that we're exploring?
Christine, I think that's yours.
There's no way for us to know, short of doing a door-to-door survey, there's no way for us to know the motivations of any particular household. What we have heard from stakeholders is that frequently, if there's a household wishing to live in a more expensive unit, they are sometimes locating just outside the city in the county. And when we just look at those mismatch graphs, the ones that are rainbow colored, we do see that in the higher income tiers, there are more households than units. So there probably is, in part, some subset of those households probably would like to live in something that's a little newer, a little bigger, a little nicer, something that would make it more expensive. But there just isn't the inventory there. But on the other hand, we also don't know, our households that are buying down market, are they doing so because they have a medical condition and they know that they'll have medical expenses they'll need to pay for, or, maybe they have student loans that they're paying off, or any consumer debt, or maybe they just want to save money and retire early. We really don't know the motivations. But even if they're buying down market because they have other debt, the fact is that housing then is what is affordable to them. In reality, as opposed to just using this HUD definition of 30% of your income going to housing.
I think too, the biggest takeaway from the rainbow chart is that when, particularly among renters, but just to a great degree among homeowners as well, when you have higher income households choosing to live beneath their means for whatever reason, and that's perfectly acceptable if that's their choice. But what it does is it decreases the inventory, the more affordable inventory that would be available for the lower income households. And those lowest income households have the least choice for living in any other housing unit that's above their income tier. And so, as Christine said, you certainly have choice if you're upper income and where you're living, especially if there's not the inventory that would support you living in a unit that aligns with your actual household income. But the real the challenge though is that it's putting pressure further down the market, and it's the lowest income that can least afford the pressure of other higher income households living in their unit, so to speak, by definition of affordable.
Right. Okay. We have a question here about zoning. It's from Laura Tony Hulsinger. Do you have any specific recommendations that inform changes to the zoning regulations that would impact availability of affordable housing.
I think that's yours, Will.
That is mine. I'll go back to me again. Did have one comment also that I look like George Costanza. Yeah, that is something we're looking at. I'll hit it back to Adam here just for a minute, but I'll just say, first of all, what we were doing is looking at what is allowed under the state code. And I mean, there are a few areas that we're exploring in the zoning ordinance as it is written. I know, Adam can speak to their efforts in regards to the zoning ordinance of what they have planned. But in Virginia, there are some limitations of what you are able to do in terms of setting some sort of inclusionary zoning as a strategy. But there are options like accessory dwelling units. Sometimes you call those granny flats. And so that's an option if that's something that the city would like to explore, where you can add additional units without dramatically changing the character of the city. It also provides an opportunity for homeowners to collect additional rental income on their property and help them stay in place as well. So that was one area that we examined, but I'll hit it back to Adam on that.
Yeah, thanks, Will. Yeah, for those that are listening out there, if you did not know, the city is also already involved and engaged in rewriting the subdivision and zoning regulations, which is a great when we're talking about housing right now, because this project will drop off in January. Will, are you getting feedback? Well, I'll try to speak through it. So we are in the midst of our rewrite of our zoning subdivision regulations. Ton Dang, the Assistant Director of Community Development, is heading up that project. We're about 25% complete right now. We're really ending the first phase of that project, and there's 4 different phases. So when this project concludes at the end of January, it will help immediately inform our consultants on the other very large scale project about what the needs and wants are of city folks here that are desiring certain types of housing, where they want housing, how the zoning regulations might change, and how we might incorporate different types of units in different zoning districts, increasing density, increasing occupancy per unit, all of these questions. In fact, some of the survey questions that are part of this project will indirectly inform us of some of those things that will inform us of the zoning ordinance. So there are questions associated with, do we want to allow more units, more different types of units, duplexes, townhomes, multifamily in existing single family home neighborhoods? Do we want to increase occupancy permissions? All of those things indirectly will then inform us and the consultants about how the new zoning regulations may be reorganized to regulate all of those things. Will, I think you're muted.
You are. There we go. Thank you. So this is a question about an anecdote here locally, and it's from Sam Nichols. And we've heard that older student units move into availability for low-income households in the city. And then you have these new student housing projects that are going up around the city. And he wanted to see is there any evidence that this is true, that older student housing is converting into affordable housing, while these new, what some might call luxury student developments are being built.
I'll start, and if somebody else wants to chime in. I don't know. I don't believe we have any specific date on that, but it's if there's any conversion going on, it's simply just the owner lowering the rents in order to fill up the vacant units that have resulted from students moving into, newer units with better floor plans or more amenities, things that students like to have. But it would be what we would call naturally occurring affordable housing and nothing with a public subsidy attached to it that we're aware of. Does anyone else have anything they would want to add to that?
The only thing I have to add is it's not hard data, like it doesn't come from a third-party source per se, but several real estate professionals have relayed that information, and then we were able to, like they named one place, a university place, specifically that sort of kept its name, from back in the day, but now it's we're told occupied by, lower income homeowners, and then that shifted over. And so that was actually part of our analysis. We did talk to, local real estate professionals that are in the know about who's buying where, basically, like what kinds of households, whether these are, investors in off-campus student housing versus, like permanent residents, let's say. And we were able to factor that in, but there's no one data source that's just going to tell us that specifically.
I would just add to that. I mean, the typical pattern, and again, we don't have data on what's happening in Harrisonburg that could confirm or deny that. The typical pattern is, you can get a lot more money out of the student housing. Large-scale conversion of student housing to low-income housing is not a common trend, other than in a very temporary situation, because there's always going to be more money to be made on the student housing.
If I can follow up on that question, I do have another one from Noel Levon. Again, I apologize if I'm not pronouncing names correctly, but he was asking about how parents might purchase a unit for their child who is going to university. So was there identification of when parents purchased a home for university students, which might see in the child's name on the deed? Or was that something kind of building off of the university question?
Go ahead, Chris.
We considered those parent income supports as part of the factor influencing the rental market. And although we know that the parents purchasing homes for their students does occur, it's not as significant a factor as those income supports being generated for students in the rental market. So at least to my knowledge, I don't think we did any kind of factoring of that.
And to add to that, we did analyze the Home Mortgage Disclosure Act database, which in short, anytime anybody applies for a mortgage to a lender, virtually any lender, then that lender is required to fill out a report and say, these people applied and these are the demographics, and this is the purpose of the loan, et cetera, et cetera. And so we did analyze that. And there were only, I'd have to look and see, this is 2018 and 19. So those 2 years worth of data of all of the homes that were financed, not sold, because HMDA data is only going to capture things that were financed. So cash sales are omitted. But of the things that were financed, there were 27 units in total that are classified as second residences. So while it might be possible that there is, a parent buying units for their students to live in while they're attending college, it's going to be pretty minimal. The median Within census tracts, we're talking like 1.5%. I mean, it's pretty minimal.
I can add to that conversation just a little bit, and it's not necessarily an answer, a response really to the question. I'm just sort of trying to figure out whether the gentleman was kind of asking a question about whether or not we were able to evaluate. This is kind of a local thing here in Harrisonburg, where parents or guardians of students will purchase units and then put their student on the mortgage, essentially, so that they are owners, and therefore the occupancy of the unit can be increased slightly to help pay for the unit, because since they are an owner occupant, they can have more unrelated individuals live with them. And I think anecdotally, there are times that may be occurring in Harrisonburg. So they might buy a unit that, when you look at the zoning ordinance and the regulations, might not be a zoning district that has multi-tenancy occupancy, but if it's an owner-occupied unit, they get that additional occupancy. It's worded a little oddly in our zoning ordinance, but essentially, if you have like an R1 zoning classification, occupancy is regulated differently depending upon if it's an owner-occupied unit or not. And I'm wondering if that's what the individual was sort of questioning, if there was any type of evaluation or an understanding about how often that might be happening, because I think there's some culture clash that occurs, of course, when you have different lifestyles, students living in neighborhoods that folks were anticipating were essentially for family areas.
Mm-hmm. We keep having questions rolling in here, and I'm trying to make sure that everyone at least has one of their questions answered. But I do want to go to Todd if we have any more calls on the line.
No, I can report that there haven't been any others.
Okay, great. Well, we have one here, Jeremy Hawkins. It is, what ability/authority does the city have to impact leasing practices and associated fees in the rental market?
I was hoping somebody
Adam,
else might
do you have, yeah,
step in.
other than housing choice vouchers where the rent is set, but that's a different, that's a very specific federal program. I'm not sure what's available or what state law would allow in terms of setting the rent rates.
Yeah,
Other than
interestingly,
rent control, but
this same sort of comment or issue came up in the other project that I was speaking about, the zoning and subdivision ordinance rewrite, about whether or not the city could control, like, creating standard leases and things like that. And I can't speak intelligently enough about whether or not that's legal in the state of Virginia.
yeah, it sounds like rent control or rent stabilization, as some states call it.
Right. I know Virginia has a lot of limitations there.
Mm-hmm.
So, to answer Jeremy's question, but very good question, Jeremy. We have another one from Tashfia Hassan. Again, please forgive me if that's not pronounced correctly, but this is kind of a follow-up question from an earlier one. She said, you mentioned that luxury student units are more profitable than building affordable units. Will you look at incentives that could be offered to build affordable units? So what types of incentives can be provided to build affordable units if they're not as profitable?
So I'll take a stab at that, and then Will, if you want to jump in, or Todd too. So you can, a lot of communities across the country have built-in incentives for developers to include a certain number or percentage of their development as affordable to a specific income level locally. The one that I'm most familiar with is a density increase. So if a developer wants to build 100 units of market rate housing, then in exchange for allowing the developer to build more units as part of the development, then some number or percentage of the total units then are required to be made affordable to a certain income level. That's the most popular one. Will, do you have anything, or Todd, you want to add to that?
I can add a little. I think, as Marjorie mentions, that sort of density bonus for affordable housing is very popular, because that's one avenue that isn't necessarily a cost to the city itself. There are other opportunities that might be a cost to the city itself, such as reducing real estate tax, which the city is already doing in some fashion, or reducing or eliminating tap fees for new development. These are the fees that new developers pay to access the city's water and sewer system. And so their building permit fees and other fees might also be reduced for affordable housing developers as a way to encourage that type of development. But in those cases, if you're forgiving taxes or forgiving fees or reducing those taxes and fees, it's important to remember that that's coming out of city revenue, and ultimately that that revenue would need to be replaced in some way.
We have Shannon Porter asked, did you look at homelessness data in the city?
We did. We looked at a lot of homelessness data, but particularly around homelessness for supportive housing, since we were looking at persons who may have needs that are consistent with supportive housing. So we looked at overall homelessness, but then really honed in on chronic homelessness in the city. And there's in the full report, there's quite a big section on the supportive housing part of our study.
Okay, great. We have Michael Wong, who you all know. He asked, can you discuss the impact of for-profit investment housing on the availability of naturally occurring affordable housing? It appears that due to the investment opportunities and high rate of return on these properties, affordable housing prices and availability is impacted. We kind of hit on that, but want to see if.
Right. So when you the communities that have required or provided incentives for developers to provide some number of units that are affordable as part of their overall development. The secret there to make it attractive for the developers is to work with them and find out at what point in the development does it will they still hit their desired profitability. So developers, I mean, that's their business, and they need to make a profit they need to make money and make a profit to pay their workers, to pay themselves, to sustain their jobs and their work in a community. And so to say then that to a developer, okay, we're going to require across the board that if you provide an additional 10 units, then we will increase your density by, X number of units. You really have to, the communities really have to sit down with developers and put pencil to paper and figure out what that sweet spot is, because it might be, maybe 15% of the units is too high, but 12% might be just right, because you don't want to make it so high that it cuts into their profitability to the point where it's not, that there's no incentive really, even though you're providing one financially, it's not an incentive, it's actually a cost to them. And if you're trying to harness the power of the private development and private developers in Harrisonburg, you really do have to make it so that they're willing to participate because their profitability would be the same, even though they'll be providing affordable housing units.
Mm-hmm. Okay. We have a question from Susie Martinez Carter, and she was asking about housing data with race ethnicity data, and how that was controlled or considered when we were collecting the data. And then what is that information telling us in terms of race and ethnicity and housing in Harrisonburg?
Christine?
In this particular study, we did not break out by race and ethnicity. This particular study is looking more at affordable housing, and from in our work, as soon as we start talking about race and ethnicity, we sort of shift into fair housing, and it's true that fair housing and affordable housing are linked. They aren't the same thing, and so housing issues by race and ethnicity are things that the city will actually end up providing that kind of information in their analysis of impediments to fair housing choice, which is a document that gets provided because the city is a HUD grantee and receives community development block grant funds. So while it's not officially a part of this study, it is something that the city does undertake on a regular basis.
Okay. And we also have Rob Alexander. He's logged in as someone else, like I was earlier. But Rob asked, do we have data about who owns rental units? For example, corporate owned versus non-resident owned versus resident owned, etc.
So I'll just take this one. The city has provided us with some data that was from the, forgive me if I get the name of the actual office incorrect, but it's the real estate division's data. And that analysis is not finished yet. It's still in the works. So that's, and in there is information about the owner. It's not always easy to tell the motivation of the owner. Sometimes you can, like if there's an LLC after it or a corp at the end of the name, then we know that that's you know, an investor or likely an investor. We can also, I can't remember off the top of my head now, if there's there's a billing address and there's also a physical location address, in which case, you know, we can look and see if those are a match. If they're a match, then we know it's owner occupied because the bills get sent to the unit. And if it's not, you know, and somebody, it's an address somewhere else, either in or out of Harrisonburg, then we know that that's probably a rental unit, an investment property. But that analysis is not finished, so I really can't speak to any of those results.
Okay, I'll group a couple of questions here. The first one was from Bailey Espalia. Again, I apologize if I'm not pronouncing that correctly. Bailey asked, when is the final report supposed to be released? And Noel Levon asked when the public can access a copy of the report and if it would be available as a PDF.
So yes, it will be available as a PDF, and we're scheduled to complete the report and provide it to Adam and his colleagues about mid-December, and then it will be presented to City Council on January 12th. And Adam, I'll leave it up to you to say when it would be available for the public, if it's going to be after the council meeting or before.
Yeah, I would anticipate it would be after City Council presentation. I know just in the big project scope, it was to be completed by the end of January 2021. And yes, it'll be posted online. It'll be PDF available. Probably, you know, just different different locations of availability.
We have Levy Fuller. What recommendations will be made for individual living in supportive housing units by way of access to public transportation? So supportive housing unit access.
Yeah, we don't have specific recommendations around transportation and supportive housing. We do have recommendations that when the city is going to be thinking about developing new housing and affordable things, that they're in those areas of opportunity that we showed on some of those maps, which include things like walkability, access to jobs, and transportation. So that's how we'll be kind of relating supportive services to other amenities and services that are needed for that household.
We're down to, I think, 5 more minutes of questions, so time for just a few more. Todd, just want to check the phone line. Anything coming in?
No, I'm sorry, nothing on the phone line.
Okay. We're getting down to the end, so if you'd like to leave a message that we can address here, you've got the phone number 540-433-1390. That line will be available after this meeting. We will not be able to answer your questions, obviously because we're in the meeting now, but we will catalog any comments that come in through the phone line after the meeting as post-processing on this. So we do have a Daniel Lamecca question here. Daniel was asking about tax burden. He said, is there a plan on easing property tax burden for Harrisonburg city residents? And he's talking about the increase in tax rates and kind of the study of AMI. I have a 4-year-old who's trying to make me laugh.
Look at these pigtails, Daddy.
In terms of this report, nothing specific to alleviating tax burden. And Adam, I don't know if you want to say something else to that.
Well, I don't really have much of a response. That those are questions that have to be answered through city council, through the city manager's office. There's lots and lots of projects, heavy hitting projects across the city. Of course, one that everybody knows I'm about ready to talk about, which is the second high school, which would have impacts on real estate taxes. So it's something that I can't really answer, and it's definitely in the realm, in the hands of city council to answer for you.
We have another question from Shannon Porter. And Shannon asks, can you speak generally about your view of the overall health of the local market with an eye toward affordable housing? How does Harrisonburg compare to other communities in this area, locally, regionally, and nationally?
Okay, I'll start off, and someone else can, maybe Chris or Jerry and Will or Todd for your local Virginia knowledge. So how does it compare? Harrisonburg is, what we've learned is it's a very strong market, and with a very, very low, too low vacancy rate, especially among rentals. There's simply an inadequate inventory of rental units to meet everyone's needs, especially at the appropriate income level. But this is not an unusual market for a university town. Morgantown, West Virginia, State College, Pennsylvania. These are communities that that's their economic engine, like Harrisonburg, and so the housing market, generally speaking, is fairly the same. Chris or Jerry, do you want to add something?
Sorry, I had to get off mute. I mean, I think one of the key statements earlier in the slide was showing the days on market for Harrisonburg, and it's about what was the number? 52 weeks or 50 some weeks is the U.S. benchmark.
54 days, right?
Or 50 days, and Harrisonburg, the lowest is getting around 2 weeks on the market and going within 3% of asking price. So, you're talking about overall very strong market, and even what we're calling there as low it's really a difference between strong market, stronger market, strongest market.
Mm-hmm. Todd or Will, anything specific maybe to other Virginia cities or Virginia college towns?
No.
Okay.
Todd, do you have anything?
Sure. I'll just, the comparisons I think are pretty familiar to people who live in Harrisonburg, but, among Virginia communities with a major university like Charlottesville, Williamsburg, and so on, are extremely attractive communities, and that makes for extremely strong and extremely competitive real estate markets. And so I think the question was, how is the market for affordable housing? And so very strong markets where vacancy is in single digits and houses stay on the market for days, not weeks, is not good for affordable housing. And that's, the data shows that, and all of your experience in the city of Harrisonburg shows that. There is very high demand because Harrisonburg is a really great city that lots of people want to live in with a limited housing supply. And so that it makes your picture very difficult, but it's not uncommon for a lot of places.
Well, we are getting at the end of our time here. I still have a very long chat line here of questions and comments, which we will have all these documented. There is one last question that I've been holding here for about 40 minutes because it seemed like a good one to end with, but it was again from Laura Tony Holsinger, and it was, all of this is wonderful data. Actually, I have seen a lot of compliments and thank yous in here as well, which is great to see. All of this is wonderful data and also feels very technical. If you could sum up in 2 to 4 sentences this report, what would it say?
I think that Todd's recent comment about Harrisburg being amenity rich and has a very strong market makes it very difficult to adequately address the affordable housing segment of your market. And I think that the most important thing to take away from this is the housing mismatch. As I said earlier, it's the pressure from the higher income households that are buying down market for whatever reason that make it very, very difficult for the lower income households to be able to find housing that they can afford.
Right. Well, thank you everyone who left comments and questions. As a follow-up off of this, while this is the virtual public meeting, we obviously had to do this virtually due to the circumstances. It's the great enthusiasm on the chat line here, and we would like to direct you to the project website. The city has hosted a site here at this link. If you go to the City of Harrisonburg's website, you can find it here with the /housing-study. We will have a few things there. One is we are recording this video, so we'll have it online. If you're watching this on Community Access and would like to watch certain segments of it again, you can go online and go to the section that interests you the most. We also have a survey that is online that will be available where you can provide additional feedback there. The call line will stay online as well. And we will leave the survey and the call line open and available to gather additional feedback, questions, comments between now and I believe it's December 3rd. So we have 2-week period that we're leaving open here to collect those comments and feedbacks. So thank you everyone who is on the line and everyone here on the panel as well. And I will leave it to Adam to close this out.
No, thanks, Will. Thanks everybody on the team here too, and thanks to everyone at home that joined us here this evening. You know, we hope that you found the information informative and helpful so that we can, you know, continue the conversations, but then to turn those conversations into actions. And that's what's so important here. And so please, please stay engaged. Please participate in the survey, ask questions, continue to engage with us. Challenge us, support us. You know, we're all going to be better off if we can work together as we move forward, and we'll have a much more successful study, project, and then end result. So I just really want to thank everybody again. So hope everyone has a great night, and thank you.